I just have to set up my props. Obviously, I'm talking about salt and light today. And so I have a bag of street salt that I picked up off the road today and some light for my home. And I've used this already this morning to find my socks and my pants. Trying to keep the room dark so that Joe could sleep while I was getting ready. Except that I dropped my belt and my buckles, making a nice big sound on the floor. Anyway, in today's gospel, it's a continuation of last week. Jesus is in the same place. He's on the side of the mountain. He's sitting down. He's talking to the few disciples that he's called so far, and the crowds are right there. So we have this image of church again, right? Matthew wants us to be one, together. And so this whole Sermon on the Mount, we're going to hear more of it as we go through the next couple of Sundays, is Jesus' sermon. And if you think my sermons might be a little long, Jesus took 5 Sundays in his sermon. Anyway, salt and light. Salt and light are very familiar to us, but what's not so familiar is the word you that is used here. If you go back to the Greek, it's the plural you. So it more would sound like you all are the salt of the earth. You all are the light of the world. And Jesus uses salt and light because they were simple. Everybody was familiar with them. In his day, salt was like money is to us. It was worth something. And if you had salt, you could use it to preserve the foods that you had, but you could also use it to barter for food maybe that you didn't have. Or you could barter for clothing, or whatever you needed, you could use salt. So in the ancient world, salt was a big deal. Now, for us, it's still important enough. We use salt in a lot of our life. And we even still use it to preserve some meats, even though we have refrigeration and they didn't in the ancient world. But we'll use, like salt is used to create lox and bagels. That salmon will last a lot longer than a piece of fresh salmon in the refrigerator. And salt we also use in our baking, like it brings out the better flavors. A lot of people know that. Salt is also used to bring down the bitterness of some things. Like I was following a recipe for broccoli rabe, and I'm not Italian, so I didn't grow up with that. But you probably know it really well. But if you don't salt the water enough, the bitterness of the broccoli rabe comes up. So you have to use more salt to bring the bitterness down. Salt obviously also melts ice, like the salt I showed you that I found on the road. And then there's light. Light illumines the darkness. We all know that. And then there's the little street lights that help us to know where we're going. And I know Pam and Rich worked to get the lights on, and we all voted to pay for the lights to go on so we could see ourselves going in and out of the lot and in and out of the courtyard. In my neighborhood, lights are at intersections. So when you get to a light, you know, even if it's a small intersection, there might be a car going in and out. So lights help us also to be aware. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I went camping and I looked up at the night sky without street lamps around me. Oh my goodness, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But when you grow up in a city area, you don't see that you don't see that. But that was beautiful, and that's a different kind of a light. It's an awesome, awesome light. And then, of course, Jesus is the light of the world. And the church put Christmas in December specifically to accentuate that during that darkest time in the year for us, there is a reason to rejoice because our God, our Emmanuel vanishes the darkness, we can see. Life is good. We can know. So lovely. So what? And the what is that salt and light are good for nothing if they are by themselves, right? In this bag, salt is not going to do anybody a hill of beans of good. And if I turn my phone off, or if I leave this and I just put it down and nobody can see the light, it's not going to help anything. And that's what part of Matthew's gospel is about today. It's in relationship. Matthew is calling us all. Jesus is calling us all to work together to be the salt and light of the world. And then our actions will make a difference. But it's got to be in relationship. And if you think about all the things that salt and light does, it's a relationship. Salt melts ice, the relationship of salt to ice. Salt in food, salt preserving meats, light offering safety for people, light offering sight to people. Jesus being the light for humanity. Even Jesus doesn't work alone. Jesus drawing out the best of us. All of that is in relationship. So back to the word you. Today's message is not for any one of us alone. And I grew up thinking that. I always thought, I am the salt. But it's not that. It's we are the salt. We are the light. Because Jesus is addressing the church. And I love what Bishop Elizabeth Eaton, the bishop in our country, of the National Synod, she always, when she writes a letter to us, she'll say, "Dear Church," right? Because we are one. And that's the punchline of today's gospel, how are we being church together? How can we make a difference? We did a real good job in September in making a difference in the world. And when we made the backpacks, the idea came up, why don't we do that again? Why don't we bring that alive again? And a couple of people started doing it, and then more joined in the thinking part of the team. And then we invited everybody to come on, I think it was September 11th, as a matter of fact. And that was the first time we had like 40 people in the church since Easter. And everybody came, and some of the teams suggested that we put the backpacks on the chairs, and it not only reminded everybody to grab your backpacks before going down the line, but what it also did is it brightened our church. And so all the different ideas that went into that day, and then all the people who made it happen, made a difference in a lot of people's lives. Coincidentally, I get something in the mail, and I put it up on the bulletin board here because it shows where the backpacks went from 2022. We don't even know exactly where they went, but it is where they went. But we were able to do all of that work because we worked together. And that's what Jesus is asking us to do today, is to think about how can you go forward, how can we go forward, collectively being the salt and the light of the world. Jesus wants us to take up the mission of the church. And Jesus wants us to be the presence of Christ in the world, wants us to light this dark, cruel world with the brightness of Christ, and to preserve the goodness of the world and to affirm one another in our journey of faith. This is what it means to be salt and light together. And together, we are baptized into the community of God's love. We are drowned in the death of sin, and we live in the promise of the resurrection. And we live in that promise each day, nourished by the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ, and nourished too by the Word, forever letting us know of God's love.